Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from anywhere or every part of the world that you're listening from. I want to say welcome to the Operation Management Masterclass. My name is Miracle. I'm an instructor in VAA Global, and I am going to be handling your operations management class. So, welcome to this masterclass, and we're going to be talking about operations management training, right? What it's about, the foundation, so it gives you an idea of what you should be expecting and gives you an idea of what you'll be expecting per venture you decide to take on the course with VA Global, and we are expecting you. Okay, so before we begin, I urge you to block out time before you start, so that because this section is very, very vital and fundamental. Okay, so get your pen, get your notebook, then because you're going to be writing and you're going to be learning a lot. So the first way to start learning is to write it out so you can always go back to it and limit distractions. This is not the time you want to be scrolling through social media. This is the time for you to learn, and silence every notification to avoid distractions. Okay, have water nearby if you want to take, although it shouldn't be a long class, but it's going to be very detailed. Even though it is a free masterclass, it's going to be detailed, and I'm sure that you're going to learn something in this class. Like I said again, my name is Miracle Indicom, and I am with VA Global. So welcome to VA Global, and let's get started in this course. Okay, so we're going to be looking at fundamentals, the process design, supply chain and quality, finance and tech, people and change, and also career. So what is operations management? So the objective here is to understand operations as a transformation process and the framework operation managers actually use. Operation management is the discipline of designing, running, and improving the processes that keep a business operating efficiently. Every operations, whether it makes physical products or you deliver a service, follows the same basic model. So if you have a physical store or you deal with physical product like maybe clothing, or phones, or you manufacture cars, things that you can see, or even deliver a service, you're a coach, you're a consultant, you sell digital products, whatever the case is, the process is the same, right? So if you look at this transformation model, we have the inputs that leads to the transformation and then to the output. When you talk about the input, you're looking at the resources, the materials, labor, the capital that you're going to use to start, and all the resources. Then transformation is putting those things into, for example, if you say you want to manufacture clothes, for example, you're going to go to the market to get the fabric, your thread, you have your sewing machines, getting all that, your lining and all of that. So that's your input. In a bit to do transformation is you schedule a time for cutting, you have a time for sewing, you have a time for ironing, you have a time for packaging, right? So all that operations is what we term as transformation in this case. And then the output is the final product. After you're done sewing your clothes and you actually have the clothes itself, then that's going to be your output. So that process is how we term, and everything that you do in terms of managing that is operations management. Do you understand? Okay, so let's take that inputs. It involves the materials, the labor, the capital, which goes through transformation process and comes out as output, which is goods or service. A feedback loop constantly feeds information back into the process so it can be adjusted and improved. And that's part of the operations. So let's look at manufacturing and versus service operations. Now, for the transformation model applies to both, but of course, the details differ because there are two different models entirely. Now, for manufacturing, produces physical goods, right? And it has inventories. Because if you're getting resources, you have to also cater for inventory management as well, because you want to know the number of stocks that you have. Like I used clothing manufacturing, for example. So if you have like stacks of clothes that you're going to buy, bundles, number of threads that you have, number of linings that you have, number of scissors that you have, all those materials, right? So you have to also take note of inventory. And also quality is also typically checked before the product reaches the customers. So for physical products, and this is very particular with the drinks industry, right? This is very particular with the drinks industry, where by the time you produce the drinks, you want to taste it and find out that it's the same taste. Imagine if you're drinking Coke in Lagos and you go to Abuja and the Coke that you're drinking is different. You're going to ask questions and you're going to be wondering what's going on. Or typical example that we can relate with is when you go to a restaurant and you like their food, right? And then this restaurant has different branches, like even across the state or somewhere else. You liked their food, you like the way they made their food, and then you go somewhere else and it's not consistent. You're going to have a problem with that, and you might not want to go there again. And the reason why some restaurants are thriving today is because their food is consistent across all franchise or all branches, right? And people will keep going there because they know that I'm going to get the same thing no matter where I go to, right? No matter where I visit these people or this restaurant, they will always give me the same thing. So you also want to check. One thing that they do is quality control. They check because they have well, I call it a threshold or a benchmark that, okay, this is the standard that we are working with. If it's below this standard, this thing is not going to go out. Do you understand? If it's the right standard, it can go out. But if it's below standard, it can't go out. So quality matters, because if there's reduction in quality, customers will not come back. They're going to have a problem with it. And one thing that you also need to know when it comes to operations management is customer satisfaction. One of the reasons why a customer will come back is because you left them satisfied with what you're giving to them, right? And that's the reason why they're going to come back, or that's the reason why they're going to refer you to somebody else, and someone is going to reach out to you to buy from you. So customer satisfaction is very, very key. I'm not going to go further on that. We're going to address that more in the course, in the paid course. Okay. So now for services are intangible, they're delivered in real time, and quality is judged by the customer as it happens, with no chance to inspect and fix it beforehand. We know what service is like, right? It's intangible, it's not something you can see. It's something that someone is delivering to you. Okay, so input is basically maybe you having a conversation with them or a consultation with them. They get all the facts that they need. They get all the let's say ideas, or they find out the problem that this client is passing through, right? Then transformation is having to now go back and see how they can tailor their solution to solve the problem that their client has. At the end of the day, by the time they have the product, right, which is it could be a digital product, it could be a course or something, right? And then the final product is what they will now deliver to the customer, where the customer goes through that process and then they are satisfied, and then it goes on. So you can see that the models is different, but then they still work on the same principle. Okay, so it works on with the same principle. Okay, so look at this. It says manufacturing is physical goods, inventory heavy, quality checks before sale. Services is intangible. We cannot see it with our own eyes, but it's delivered in real time. Quality judged as it happens when the client experiences the products or the services that has been rendered. Now let's look at two frameworks worth knowing. We have the Lean and the Six Sigma. What you need to know right now is about Lean is that Lean focuses on eliminating waste, anything that does not add, which means anything that does not add value to the customer. Okay, and Six Sigma focuses on reducing the variation and defects using statistical analysis. Now, many operation teams blend both into what is called the Lean Six Sigma, using Lean's waste elimination mindset along Six Sigma. So in the main course, we divided this thing and we went into more details about Six Sigma, what it's about, the lean waste elimination mindset. There's a framework that we can use to detect, because the reason why you are an operations manager is because you want to manage situations. It's something that I tell my students that you need to pay attention to. Should I tell you? Should I not tell you? Should I tell you? Should I not tell you? Okay, so what you need to know is that timing is very important. You need to do things at the right time, at the right moment, right? Doing the right things at the right time, at the right moment is very key in operations management, because there's a reason why you're managing situations. Everything is supposed to go seamless because you're handling it. Because there's a lot when it comes to manufacturing and producing stuff, there's a lot of chaos. So the reason why you're there is to ensure that things are seamless. Nothing is being wasted. Everything is done properly. Every resources that is gotten is maximized properly. You can account for everything, no wastage. Very, very important. So now in the transformation model, what does this feedback loop actually do? Right? So it slows the process down on purpose. It feeds information back into the process so that it can be adjusted and improved. And then it also only applies to manufacturing, not services, and it replaces the need for input. Okay, it replaces the need for inputs. All right, so this confirms that you can feed information back into your process so that it can be adjusted and improved. Right, so a company focuses on reducing defects using statistical analysis is applying which framework? So sorry, excuse me. A company focused on reducing defects using statistical analysis is applying which framework? You want to answer that in your notebook because we already discussed that. So ensure that you answer that and follow through in the course. Okay, I hope you're learning something. So now let's look at process design and improvement. Now the learning objective about process design is to understand how operation teams map, evaluate, and also continuously improve your process. If you've noticed something with companies over time or over the years, why some companies have closed down or shut down is because they were unable to improve their processes, or in other words, they were unable to evolve as the world was changing, because change is constant. Change is a constant thing. You always have to change, and change also requires you to improve processes as well, if you understand what I mean. So now, before you can improve a process, you have to see clearly. Now, when you talk about process mapping, this is where you're able to practice laying out every step of your workflow visually. Now, so that you can be able to detect bottlenecks, delays, and waste becomes like this is where you can detect bottleneck, delays, and waste, right? Instead of them being hidden. Now, the reason why it's important that you map out things or write out things or write out this process is because it helps you to audit and reflect on your process, so that if there are anything that is hidden that could stand as an obstacle in ensuring that your process is seamless, you would not be able to detect it if you don't map this thing out. If, for example, you want to do something, right? You want to achieve, let's even real time. You want to achieve a goal, for example. You set out that, oh, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight in the next 1 month. Losing weight is very vague. Now, there's nothing hidden, there's nothing you can detect from this. But when you say, I want to lose weight, I want to lose about 20 kg, that's not realistic. I want to lose about 5 kg in 30 days. You now map out, okay, how do I want to lose 5 kg in the next 30 days? You're going to have to audit the things that you've been eating. What's your daily routine like? Have you been exercising? If you have not been exercising, what's stopping you from exercising? You now start seeing bottlenecks. You start seeing things that delays. So, for example, you realize that when you check your routine, you realize that, oh, you've not been working out. You don't have time to work out. But if you don't do that, if you don't map it out, your mind will not take you to the fact that, oh, you need to hit the gym because you've not been working out enough, or you've not been walking enough to be able to lose the weight that you see. Do you see the idea behind your process mapping? So that's pretty much the idea behind it. That is very, very important. Now, I'm still talking about lean. We have the 8 wastes of lean that I want us to talk about quickly. We have lean identifies 8 specific type of waste, often remembered by the acronym downtime, right? And learning to spot these in a real process is one of the most practical skills an professional can develop, right? So, like I said, lean is to eliminate waste, and that's like a major key factor that you need to pay attention to. Now, for the downtime, is an acronym for defect, overproduction, waiting, non-utilized talent, transportation, inventory, motion, and extra processing. So we're going to talk further more on this in the class, in the paid class. So I'm looking forward to seeing you and having you in the class so that we can deep dive more on these things, how to detect them, and also how to avoid eliminating waste so that we're more productive or more efficient as as operations managers. So now let's look at SOPs. SOPs, I'm sure this is something that we've heard over time, but SOPs are what we call standard operating procedures. Remember that I mentioned about when it comes to quality, you're supposed to have a specific standard that you're working with. So now this links up to the SOPs. Now, an SOP is a documented step-by-step description of how a task should be done. So if you are working with a particular standard, and remember this thing, there's something we call garbage in, garbage out. If you're expecting a particular result, there's an amount of work, or there's an amount of work, or how you do a particular work will determine the kind of result that you're going to get. So now, when you have a particular standard, you want to also look at how much of work, what type of work do we need to put in to be able to get these results? Do you get? So, and for you to now break this thing down, you need to have it into a standard operating procedure. Why is it important? Because another thing about a business is business is supposed to, you cannot, it's not a business where if you have to run it 24/7, you're going to, and if you have to scale your business, it means that you're going to have people working with you. It might even be you might probably be working in a company, and you need to understand that if your company does not have an SOP, that's a very big problem. Because if you get in someone or a new person, they need to understand how workflow happens. They need to understand the process. They need to understand what is done. So is this document that is going to teach them or show them or guide them, right, on how to do what they need to do. Do you understand? And also, when someone is not doing something properly, you can also relay them back to the SOP for them to be able to look at it and know how to do what they need to do best. Okay, so this is written. So an SOP is a documented step-by-step description of how a task should be done, right? To be done, and it is written so that anyone on the team, not just the person who has always done it, can follow it consistently. Writing real SOP is a core tangible skill employers specifically look for. So one thing I need to understand is being able to write SOP, knowing that SOP is a requirement in your organization. So if you come into a workplace and realize that okay, they don't have an SOP for how they do things, you want to bring it to them that, oh, okay, this is what we need to do. Okay, so we're going to talk more in depth about how to create SOPs and more details about SOPs. So now we also have Kaizen and the PDCA cycle. Now Kaizen means continuous incremental improvement, small changes made regularly. Remember, I mentioned that we need to always continuously improve, right? So Kaizen and the PDCA cycle is going to help you with that. So the full meaning of PDCA cycle is the framework is plan, do, check, act, and it's a practical loop teams use to run Kaizen in practice. And where you plan a change, if you plan to change something, you test it, check whether it works, and then if it does, you act on what you've learned, and then repeat what actually worked. So from this framework, from this diagram, you can see the arrow says plan, you do, check it, and then you now, when you've seen that, oh, this actually works, you now act on it, and then the cycle continues because you are always going to continuously do what? Improve. Right. So quick check. I'm asking you, so what is the main purpose of process mapping? Is it to make a process look more complicated, to make bottlenecks and waste visible instead of being hidden, to replace the need for SOPs, or is it only used in manufacturing? I'm sure by now you already know what that is. I'm like, by now should know a thing or two about operations management. Okay, now what does check step in PDCA actually involve? Writing the original plan, checking whether the change you tried actually worked, skipping straight to the next improvement, or documenting the SOP. If you have been listening, you should actually know the answers. You should actually know the answer to this. Okay, so now let's talk about supply chain and quality fundamentals. I'm sure that we know what supply chain means, right? It's not the first time you've heard what supply chain is. So let's just go through a quick overview of what supply chain means. Now, our objective is just for you to be able to understand how supply chain and quality management fit inside an operations function. Now, supply chain management sits inside operations, and then it also covers how a business sources source for materials, hold inventory, and move goods through the customer. So when you hear supply, a chain is a connection of several things. A chain, connect, 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 right? So supply chain management sits inside operations, covering how a business source for materials, hold inventory, move goods through the customer, and also moving through the customer also involves delivery, delivery and logistics. Okay, so so when you're talking about supply chain, this is what it involves: the procurement, the inventory, the logistics, and the customers. Okay, and the customers basically. So an operations manager doesn't need to be a supply chain specialist. Okay, but understanding procurement, inventory level, and logistics trade-off is very essential, because delays and shortages anywhere in that chain becomes the operations team's problem to solve. Now, supply chain is involved in operations, is part of it. I'm not saying that you should now become a supply chain specialist. You can, even a well-grounded organization, always have supply chain operators, right? Which you're going to be working hand in hand with. Okay, so but understanding certain things when it comes to supply chain is very, very important. And that's like one of the key things that we're going to be looking at. We're going to be looking at in depth on what supply chain is, right? In depth on what supply chain is, how supply chain works, and how it's important, and how an operations manager can handle supply chains, the disruptions that are involved, how to manage your inventory, and down to distribution and logistics to your customer, ensuring that your customer gets what they wanted, what they paid for, not what I ordered versus what I got, what they planned to get, or what they ordered from you. They're getting exactly that same thing, so that they are satisfied. Remember, I said this thing. I'm going to say again that one key thing about being an operations manager is to understand that customer satisfaction is very key, and that's one of the things that keep you in business. If you're hearing someone saying that, oh, I'm getting referrals, oh, and all of that, that comes from customer satisfaction, or your customer is sending a review or posting about your product or your service, how great you have been and what you're doing. That comes from customer satisfaction. But it starts from the foundation, it starts from your supply chain, it starts from your sourcing, down to when your operations, your map flow, your processing, down to you delivering to them. And I say this thing a lot of times, that these things, when it comes to operations, every aspect is connected. They work like a body. It's how your body, your hands, your head, your legs, your shoulders, your ears work together as a body. That's the same way it works in operations. One is not working independent of the other. No. So if there's an issue in one part, it reflects on the other part. So that's the reason why you're there. So ensure that everything is seamless and everything is done and nothing is being left out, nothing is missed out in the first place. Okay, so now let's talk about quality assurance versus quality control. Now, these two terms get confused easily. Quality assurance is not the same thing as quality control. For quality assurance, this is about preventing defects before they happen. It is process focused, it is proactive. Now, quality assurance is being done during production. Do you understand? It is done during production to ensure that at the end of the day, let's get what we want. So it's focused on actually getting the standard. right? But for quality controls, may I say that quality control is like two-factor authentication, right? You've done everything, to ensure that you produce the actual standard. Quality control is now you running it, testing it again to see if there is any mind. Because but if it's human in, like, if the work is human intent, where humans are doing most of the work, human beings make mistakes. There are some things that they might have missed out on, and it might not be intentional. So the essence of quality control is now to check it again and see if there is any defect after we're done with production. So this is more inspection focused and is reactive. So taking it again, QA is preventive, right? And it is proactive and process focused. While quality control, it is reactive. You are now inspecting, it's inspection focused. It is after it has happened. We want to now look at that thing again and see if there's any defect. And then we now take it back. Okay, we can adjust this thing, right? So it is important because you don't want to move something out or deliver something to a customer and it is below standard, and then they have to return it to you again, and then you probably have to now use extra resources to rework it. Remember that I mentioned that one thing that we're also trying to do is to eliminate waste. Imagine if you have to rework something again, you're going to be using extra time, you're going to be using extra effort, you're going to be using extra resources that could have been used for something else to rework that thing again because you avoided quality control. For quality assurance, we can understand that there are some things that you missed out on, but quality control is to ensure that everything that was missed initially is going to be sorted out. Do you understand? So this is the idea, to also avoid any mistake or avoid your goods being returned back to you. You want to avoid that. So now let's talk about ISO standard and the root cause analysis. Now for ISO standard, like ISO 9001 for quality management, are internationally recognized frameworks a business can be certified against, right? Signaling to customers and partners that its process meets a consistent standard. When something does go wrong, root cause analysis often use a simple technique like asking why 5 times in a row, helps teams fix the actual underlying problem instead of just patching the symptoms. So the whole idea for this is to sometimes to get the root cause of a particular problem, right? You cannot just look at something and detect what the problem is. There's something we call asking a question 5 times in a row, right? To get the root cause of a particular problem. So if something constantly keeps happening, we want to check what the root cause of that problem is. One way to do that is to ask a question 5 times. We're going to give more in-depth examples in the class. Okay, so we're going to give more in-depth examples in the sessions that we're going to have together. Okay, so now let's do a quick check again as usual so that we know that you are following. So which of these best describes quality assurance? Quality assurance. So you want to first ask yourself, what is quality assurance? And that's the best way you're going to be able to use to answer these questions. Expecting finished products for defects, preventing defects before they happen through good process design, only relevant in manufacturing, the same things as quality control. Even these questions are pretty easy and you'll be able to get the answers. So this quick check is just for you to be able to check if you actually got what has been taught so far. And if not, you can always just go back and refresh your mind, refresh yourself again and understanding. Why does an operation manager need to understand supply chain basics, even without being a specialist? Because operations and supply chains are legally the same job, because supply chain delays and shortages become operational problems that the team has to solve. Supply chain has nothing to do with operations. Only large companies need this knowledge. Now, let's talk about financial operations and technology. Yes, this is very important when it comes to operations management. Our objective in this case is to understand how operations decisions get measured financially and how modern technology supports the work. Now, operation decisions have real financial consequences. Very, very valid, right? And operations managers are increasingly expected to speak the language of budget and cost control, not just process design. Now, there's something called CAPEX versus OPEX. Now, this is a CAPEX is capital expenditure, is the short form of capital expenditure, which covers one-time, long-term investments like equipment or buildings. For operating expenditures, which covers the ongoing day-to-day cost of running the business, salaries, supplies, utilities. Knowing which bucket a decision falls into shapes how it gets approved and budgeted. So you can have financial managers, but because as an operations manager, you're pretty much the one running the business. So every aspect matters to you. Every aspect of the business matters to you. So when it comes to funding, because you also have to manage funding, you cannot just let money just go out like that. Do you understand? You can't just let money go out like that. So you need to know what is capital expenditure for long-term investments like buildings, acquiring land, or we need to buy a machine, we need to do all those ones. We need to know when do we need it in the company at the moment, or is it something that is important now? Because some things might be important, but they are not necessary at that phase. Imagine buying a machine and you are not using it at that point because you don't have the capacity or probably the staff strength to be able to run it. It doesn't make sense. Do you understand? So, but for operating expenditures, for day-to-day cost of running the business, you have to buy inventories, salaries, supplies. You're going to be able to handle that as well. Now, so let's talk about operation KPIs. Now, operation team tracks recurring metrics to prove their impact. Things like cycle time, which means how long a process takes to start or to finish. We have the cost per unit, we have the on-time delivery rate. Now, when we talk about KPIs, it means key performing indexes, right? And there are metrics that are expected, right? The metrics that are expected. And so these are things that you want to keep in mind. These are the things that you want to also keep in mind, basically. So now we have a cost benefit analysis where you weigh the expected financial return of a change against the cost, and it's often what gets an improvement project approved in the first place, right? Then we also have the ERP, which means enterprise resource planning. So example of this system, we have SAP and we have the Oracle, centralized data from across a business, finance, inventory, sales, HR, procurement into one connected system, and replacing scattered spreadsheet with a single shared source of truth, right? Sorry, excuse me. Okay, so how an ERP system connects a business? We have the finance, we have the inventory, we have the sales, we have the HR, we have the procurement. One shared source of truth instead of 5 disconnected spreadsheets. Now, the thing about systems is to connect things together, right? Is to connect things together. So these systems, we're going to talk about it in depth, right? Talk about what Oracle does, what SAP does. Now, these systems that we're talking about, like sales, inventory, have their own expectations, or they have how things work. So every system that is particular about that covers each of these things, we're going to be covering we're going to be covering them in the class, and how they connect to the business is very, very important, because it was going to help you as an operations manager make things easier for you. It doesn't leave you confused, and it was not going to make you seem like you do not know what you're doing. Because you need to also remember that you're the connection between the top and the staff. Because most times the management does not really have any business talking with the staff members, except maybe there's like a general meeting. So they're gonna want to get reports from you. So if you don't understand a particular maybe like financial advisories or financial management, the financial aspects, because you're going to be learning some things on accounting and all of that. Yes, you're going to be learning some things about that's accounting related. If you don't understand these things, how do you want to report back to the management? How do you want to do that? So these systems will help you, will help make things organized for you, and how seamless, and make things seamless for you during your operations. A company buys, quick check, a company buys a new warehouse building. Is this capex or opex? I'm sure that we'll be able to identify that. What's the main benefit of an ERP system? Very, very important. Now let's talk about leading people and managing change. Now, understand how operations managers lead teams and guide change, not just optimize processes on paper. Now, remember, I just even said you now that you're like the connection, right? Because you're going to be reporting more to managers, you're the management, and most times you're going to be the one to manage and supervise your team members or the staff in the organization that you're working with. Meaning that most of the time they will have to report to you, you're going to have to discuss with them, they're going to get leadings from you. They're going to get leadings from you and all of that. Now, this process, it only improves if the people running it actually adopts the change, which makes people leadership just as central to the operations as process design itself. Now, let's talk about learning change management model. One of the simplest, most enduring ways to think about leading change means where you help people see why the current way isn't working. Now, change in this case means implementing the new process, and the phrase is unlock the new way in as the normal way, like locking now, right? As normal way of working, so it doesn't quietly slide back to the old habits. Now, that's the whole idea about unfreeze, change, and refreeze. Now, let's talk about stakeholder communication. Operations changes rarely affect only one team. Clearly, early communication with everyone, the change touches not just direct reports, it's usually the difference between a change that sticks and one that quietly gets abandoned within a few weeks. Let me take that again. Operation changes rarely affect only one team. Now, clearly, early communication with everyone, the changes touches not just direct reports. It's usually the difference between a change that sticks and one that quietly gets abandoned within a few weeks. Now, another thing that you need to know is your stakeholders can also be your team members, can also be the management. Now, communication is very, very key, right? Communication is very, very key. If there are going to be any changes, you need to clearly and on time communicate these changes. Okay, Very, very important. Now, let's look at in Lewin's model, what does refreeze stage actually accomplish, right? Changes, cancels the change, blocks the new way of working, and as the new normal. It seems the same as the unfreeze stage. To me, applies to manufacturing. If you do not get this, go back go back and read, listen again to get the answer. Where the jobs actually are. Now, view entry levels and growth roles that you can target. We have the operations coordinator, where you oversee and supervise stuff. I do this a lot for clients. That's like one of the capacity that I work in a lot. Operations coordinator for busy CEOs that cannot really handle stuff. So yeah, very, very important. It's a good role, and it's very interesting. It would test you, but yeah, it's very, very interesting. So then we also have the operations analyst. We have the process improvement specialist, supply chain coordinator, the operations manager as well. I also function in that capacity, and also quality assurance officers. You want to also maybe check online. That's the kind of a task that I'm giving you. Go and check online, read up on these rules, and see the essence, right? So it's very, very important. So what employers actually screen for is comfort with process documentations, you being able to create SOPs, familiarity with project tools as well, and like money.com, Asana, and also having an idea of ERP basics, which is like, for example, the SAP or SAP and the Oracle, and having a working grasp of the frameworks covered in these sessions, and a recognized certificate as a credibility signal when you don't yet have direct experiences. But guess what? In the training with VA Global, is we're going to be teaching you in depth on these things, helping you with your foundations, and also you get to do an internship after your program that helps you with getting an experience. And in that process, you could also create your portfolio with having experience. And that's one thing VA Global is going to help you with your CV, help you with your CV, guide you with getting a job, and also and also your internship or creating a portfolio. So you see that it's an amazing, it's going to be an amazing experience for you to learn a new skill that is very, very necessary in today's world or industry. And the good thing is you can apply this to different industries, right? It does not restrict you, or it does not box you. And that's one of the things I like about operations management and also project management. So let's ask yourself, sorry, this was me that I think I mistakenly clicked on this. So this already gave the answer. So which of these is most likely to be screened for by an operations employer? So from here we can see that comfort with SOPs, project tools, and ERP familiarity is very necessary for entry level candidates. So you need to know how to use SOPs, project tools, and having an idea of ERP and knowing what ERP familiarity, being familiar with ERP systems. And now we've come to the end of the masterclass. Amazing. So this has given you an idea of what operations management is about. It's very, very important. I mean, we cannot finish what operations management is, but I'm sure that you can tell that this is pretty interesting. And when we go in depth on what operations management is, if I'm sure that when you get or you want to make inquiries, you're going to get full details on what the course is about. And I'll be looking forward to having you on board, and let's work together. I would love to be a part of your journey, helping you grow as and learning about being an operations manager in today's world. Thank you once again. My name is Miracle. I'm glad that you've learned something today because I know that you did. And I'm going to be seeing you in class. Don't sleep on this. Thank you, everybody, and take care.